I quit hockey and I played a little bit of varsity baseball as a sophomore at De La Salle. And I went back for my junior year to De La Salle thinking, okay, you know what, this will be fun. I'm playing baseball only. And that coach cut me. I was so pissed because I was a good baseball player. I loved baseball. He broke my nose. And the aforementioned judge, he used to sit right next to the visitor's penalty box, first row. And I'm getting up and collecting my teeth or whatever, and I'm skating past the judge, and the judge is just shaking his head. It's like,
welcome to Dealer Out of Office. We're your hosts. I'm Frank Zombo.
I'm Jake Berkal, and we are here to talk to you about dealers' interests outside of the office.
Now watch this draft.
What is up, everyone? Welcome back to Dealer Out of Office. As always, I'm your host, Jacob Berkal, alongside my good buddy, Frank Zombo. And today we have a very special guest, friend of the program, friend of the company, first round draft pick, third overall with, I believe it was New Jersey, if I remember correctly. Stanley Cup champion with the Colorado Avalanche, Craig Wolanin. Welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Jacob. Appreciate it. And it was New Jersey. It was moons ago, but it was New Jersey.
What a resume! I mean, I'm looking at the Hockey DB right now, Craig, and it's a plethora of cool teams that we want to get into. That we're going to talk a lot about. Colorado being Michigan based, we're going to talk a lot Colorado, Detroit. But we always want to start from the beginning. You're a Michigan kid. What started the love of hockey? What, kind of brought you in? Where'd you go? Juniors, there's so many different ranks. I'm kind of geeking out because I'm a hockey guy, right? So, you went to the OHL, you went junior route, that sort of thing. Was college on your mind? Start kind of, from the beginning, I guess.
Well, the beginning really it's quite simple, really. It starts on ponds. For most of us, it did. I think today, it's much more formal in how kids are introduced to whatever, hockey or sports. And in our case, growing up in Warren, typical, 40-foot lots. Our neighbors used to make a pond for us. And it was funny because we had my mom's house, nuns, Catholic nuns, and then our neighbor's house. And, thank God they were nuns because their house took abuse at the time, and be it their garage or us climbing their fence with our skates on to retrieve pucks and what have you. So, and inevitably, those are the best memories. But it started in Warren and Fraser Hockey Land, which is is still there.
A beautiful road.
That it was really just kind of grassroots. It's again today. Everybody is everywhere all the time. Back then it was, we were pretty local, be it Fraser or St. Clair Shores. And Warren did have a rink, but Fraser was the primary area that we skated at. My parents were divorced when we were young, so my two brothers and I, we weren't going to be traveling a whole lot when we were young. But so that's where it started. 4 or 5 years old. And I'm not sure the reason I started. I have an older brother that played hockey, and I'm not sure why he started. But that's where the journey began and stayed for the longest of times until, as I started to progress a little bit, we had some pretty good teams in the St. Clair Shores area. Yeah. And then as I got into my midget years, like 14 or 15 years old, CompuWare joined the ranks.
Was CompuWare the original, or was it Caesars that kind of started the whole AAA?
I was just going to say that. Caesars has been there forever, right? And there were other teams like Paddock Pools, for example. They were a major sponsor. They had other ones like SNA Industries. Mr. Aldridge used to sponsor teams, but Caesars was the sponsor and continues to be the sponsor throughout the years. But so, CompuWare, Mr. Kamanis was just starting CompuWare at the time and starting to get into sponsorships and things like that. And after the St. Clair Shores years, they were skating out of Oak Park. Guys like myself and others, Al Iafrate, the Hatcher brothers,
Yep.
Patty LaFontaine, Al Iafrate, did I say him? Jimmy Carson, who
Those are
else?
big names.
Adam Bird. There was a bunch of us within a certain amount of age group that ended up playing with CompuWare. And, from there I was drafted into juniors, probably at 16 years old. I went to play in Kitchener, Ontario. That's about the time I had to make a decision whether I was going to play juniors in Canada or, pursue college. Many of the guys like Iafrate and Carson and, Kevin Hatcher and his brothers, they were all kind of drifting toward major junior in Canada. The caveat back then was that if you played major juniors, you were paid. I think I made $55 a week Canadian, and I forfeited my college eligibility for that $55 a week. So I did that, and I was in Kitchener for a year, drafted by New Jersey the following year, and drafted as a 17-year-old into the NHL and played as an 18-year-old.
Easy.
It's incredible.
Hey, Craig, I have young kids, and, at what point did you realize, like, being a first-round pick, you're different? At what point did you realize, like, hey, I could go real far in hockey? Or, like, what was your mindset during that time? When did you realize, like, I'm going to really work hard at this? Like, when did you have that realization?
I would say my journey is atypical, Frank, because we never thought about pros. Like we always dreamed, and we were always playing, like I said, on the pond or in the street, right? And we were always whomever it was at that time. A lot of the Red Wing alumni I know personally now through my experiences with them, but watching them growing up, we aspired to be them just in the streets, right? I quit playing hockey at 15 for a year, and I was just tired of it. I was worn out. I had just some influences in my life that kind of didn't make it fun anymore. And so I had just had enough of it, and I quit. I went to De La Salle. I quit hockey, and I played a little bit of varsity baseball as a sophomore at De La Salle. And I went back for my junior year to De La Salle thinking, okay, you know what, this will be fun. I'm playing baseball only. And that coach cut me. And I'm like, mother, I was so pissed because I was a good baseball player and I love baseball. And so I stopped playing. I got cut from baseball. I kind of walked home, told my mom that I didn't, I got cut. And she says, well, your grades got to go up. Because now I got time, right? I got no sports. I played all the sports. And she said, your grades got to go up. And so I started playing hockey again. And that was probably at 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. And
who would have thought 2 years later, you're a first-round draft pick in the
exactly.
show?
So, and I wasn't that guy that worked hard, Frank. I did not work hard, and I had a poor attitude. I did, and, back then, I think it's better now. My parents were divorced when we were young. It wasn't as talked about as much then as it is now, but, some way, somehow it has an effect on you. And, we had great parents, don't get me wrong. But, I did have a bad attitude, right? I didn't work real hard, but I enjoyed playing hockey. In spite of all that, Frank, like you said, when you go to play junior hockey in Canada, you're onto something, right? Like they feel like there's something there. So I guess to answer your question in a roundabout way, at about 16 or 17, I don't know if I thought I could make a living out of it, but certainly I was going to give it a try, and my parents entrusted me to do that, and it worked out.
I'd say so.
It worked out.
Yeah.
That being said, if I could do it over again, I'd have gone to school.
Was there anybody that maybe you didn't realize you wanted to play in the NHL or you had the talent to do it? Was there anybody along the way that was like, Craig, and again, maybe your parents were that support, but they were like, hey, you got it. Like, you should pursue this, or anyone that kind of was like a mentor along that way for you to take it more serious or anything like that?
Well, I think that's what I had was it. I think that it was in me, meaning I understood it. I understood what it took. At least I thought I understood what it took, meaning I wasn't going to take shortcuts. I had an understanding of how to play hockey, and meaning on that ice surface, I could tell you any angle from anywhere on the ice. You put me in a classroom and make it geometry, you're looking at a dunce, right? So I just understood how to play hockey, and I had an aptitude and a willingness to sacrifice. And so I think that for some reason I was allowed enough time for that to flourish a little bit. And the group that drafted me in New Jersey was just top notch, just top notch people all the way around. And I was very fortunate to be drafted by them because across the board, they were well respected. The team necessarily wasn't, because it was really in its infant stages. In fact, a couple of years before I got drafted by New Jersey, Wayne Gretzky called them a Mickey Mouse organization, and so it was just the startup. It was just part of the process. So by the time I got there, it was great. And I had in the hockey world, right, we call it billeting. I lived with a family for my first 3 years because I was 18, 19, and 20 my first 3 years. So I stayed with this big Italian family in New Jersey. And the judge and Lucille, they had a tremendous influence on me, like really, really. The judge would have been the one. He would have been the one that encouraged me all the time to, what I was capable of, and just the talks that we would have. We would have these type of chats, around the table after a game. After a game, I would go to his quarters, and he would be in the courtroom, and he'd see me walk into the back of the courtroom, and then court would be adjourned. I'd join him in his quarters, and he would disrobe, and we'd jump in our cars and get home. And the pasta dinners I had with him late at night, because I wasn't going out drinking then. I made up for it, but I wasn't going out drinking then. But the judge was like probably that one that he kind of reinforced everything that my parents or anybody else around me, but he spoke so softly that I heard him, like I just heard him. Like he was just terrific, And so I guess if I had anybody other than my close family, it would have been him.
I want to bring it back a little bit, Craig, to what you said about getting burned out. And I think, I got 2 boys who they're going to play hockey, I hope. Frankie's got 4 boys. You have a son who I don't know where he's at right now. I know he's played he's was with Ottawa. He was with Vancouver. He's a few different places right now, but he was always a special talent, right? Growing up, and little known fact.
Is he around the same age as you?
Christian, I believe, is a year or 2 younger than me. Is he a 95?
Well, he's probably, he's 95. So what are you, 94?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Christian was good. Like, we played on the pond out in Lake Orion. Like, Christian was a good hockey player, is a good hockey player.
Yeah.
How did you kind of combat that? Because I got burned out. I quit, I quit hockey. I think a lot of people, there's just so much, especially with hockey culture. I know it's like, you got to have, your skating coach, you have to have your hands coach, you have to have your off ice. Like, there's just so much going into kids who are 8, 9, 10 years old. And by the time they get to an actual maturity physically and mentally, they're like, I'm done with this. So what's kind of what did you do with maybe differently from when you started to your son, to, where the game is now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I kind of summarized by saying, if I'd have raised Christian to be a hockey player, he'd have been a lot better than he is. And I say that because that was not our intent. Our intent was to have dinner around the table. My wife was adamant about that. And I would say hockey, in his case, just got in the way of things, It was important to him because he loves hockey and he loves to play hockey. And incidentally, he finished this year in the Bruins organization in Providence. But our approach was very simple. And it's what I still coach kids today, And I always tell the parents, I said, if you do what's right by your family first, you'll never regret it. Frank's got, 4 boys, Frank? Right? You've got 2, Jacob, right? In the hockey world, man, the family comes, right? So whether it's sisters or brothers or whomever, aunts, uncles, grandparents, it's a really familial game. And so my advice to parents is do what's right by your family, the entire family. For example, we're in the off season now. I coach with Pat Peake, who was a first-round pick to Washington, who had his career ended prematurely, very prematurely. And he and our approach is get away from the game, be an athlete, play football, play flag football, play lacrosse. And I think that's what's happening these days is that we're creating hockey players, but we're losing athletes. And I think some of the best kids that I had growing up, including Christian, were athletes, right? My football players had an understanding of space, leverage, timing, all this stuff that I really enjoyed. And I wasn't, and still not one of those coaches that if it's football season and they're missing a practice to play a football game, that's the way it should go. And so I think that's kind of how Christian was raised. When it was lacrosse season, he played lacrosse. Yeah. Hockey, and so on and so forth. And I'm really proud of him, Jacob, because, as a first-round pick, I get 9 lives, right? Everybody thinks they can do something with me because I was a first-round pick, right? And sometimes it's timing, right? Sometimes, maturity-wise, I was pretty wise at 17, 18 years old. Physically, I had to catch up a little bit. And then, I don't know, for me, the timing never really synced. By the time I was really ready to be a pro, 12, 13 years into it, my career was over, right? And in Christian's case, everything that he has done, it's been either a late bloomer or it's been an absolute grind. It's always been the hard way. And, and he's mashing out a career of it. I'm really proud of him because it's easy to quit, right? We all think we want it until we got to go get it. And when you got to go get it, as Frank can attest to, you're playing against men. And
they want the same thing. And they've worked their whole lives to get to the same point. Yeah. And I did want to ask you that Jake beat me to the question that was one thing I want to talk to you about is because with my 4 boys right now, I get so many people that ask me oh, your son's going to be football players? Are they going to go pro like you? And it's who knows? You know what I mean? And it's almost needed advice of how did you approach that? I know my sons play everything. But I also a lot of my questions are related towards, because even if it's not my kids, but I am around a lot of youth. And at what point do I really even I look at some kids and some kids have it. Sometimes kids, it might take a little longer for them to find it. Some of them find it and then they peak earlier, whatever it is. But I kind of want to I do look at my sons a certain way to find out how competitive are they? How much does it hurt? Are they able to get to a point of where they can't go any further, and do they push through it, or do they cower a little bit? And I try to relate it to maybe how I grew up. And my upbringing of playing football was playing with the older kids in my subdivision in the front yard of, whatever games we would play. But that's how I played. It wasn't as organized. Now they're in lacrosse, football, flag football, all this different stuff. Yeah. But I'm trying to figure out what traits do the kids that have it. What is that? Yeah. What is that? Or
Yeah, and I don't think it's a cookie cutter. That's the thing. I don't think it's a cookie cutter type of thing because, as you mentioned, that person that has it type of thing, it manifests itself on their time, not my time as a coach, right? Or your time as a parent. And so I think that's the one thing I've learned through Christian, and the one thing I can relate to parents today, even though there's a lot of emotions that go into these decisions because a lot of parents think that it's got to happen today. And for example, our kids are 15, the kids I coach are 15 years old right now. Now juniors are starting to look at it. But in reality, with NIL and the transfer portal and COVID and all that junk, 15, I mean, you could be 8 years away from college, right? I don't know what the average age of, some of these teams that are winning in college sports now, like Indiana, for example, on the football side of things. Like, I don't know what their average age is, but it's not 19, right?
It's like they're grown-ass men.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Ferris State on the football side of things has done well. I think they're D2, right?
Yep.
They've done really well over the years, but they've had an older group. Western Michigan, when they won the NCAAs the other year, I think they were in their early 20s on average, right? And so that the whole thing has been pushed back, meaning you can take time to develop. And the kids, as long as they're in an environment in which they're learning and they're having fun, they'll have that time to allow for development. But it's their time. It's not ours. It's not mine, right? I'm not gonna expedite that curve, right? And I've watched my son do it, and he would attest. I wish he could be here with us because I just love listening to him now and having this kind of discourse with him now that he's a 30-year-old, 31-year-old, right? And a father, right? It's all these things. Man, it's so much more fun for me now with him being where he's at, that because the information that I get now, it's real time to the kids I coach. And it's not my words. It's now yours, Frank, or it's now yours, Jacobs, or Christians, or whoever's, and I can impart that to the kids. They can do what they want with it. Some can process it right now. Others, it may be a few years for them. But it will be there. It will be there. Whatever it is, it will. And they may be able to apply what they learned in the sport into what you guys are doing, And my guess would be at Auto Hauler there is that you see a kid, an athlete, on their resume, you're like, all right, man, this kid played football or this kid played lacrosse, right? So we have an intern here at our office right now. I'm like, Trevor, you're a lacrosse player, right? And I'm talking about doing the dishes up in the kitchen. I said, if somebody else's dishes were in that sink right there, would you do them? And now I said, yeah, you do them because you're an athlete, right? You know how to take care of your teammates. And that's the kind of exchange I love having with young people these days, right? I think there's a higher expectation if you're an athlete. I just do. And hopefully coaches are coaching that.
Be a good athlete, but a better person.
Yeah.
To kind of get back to I love that. And I know, I just think it's funny. You get the crazy hockey parents. It's like, yeah, little Johnny might be really good at 9 years old, but wait till he finds, booze and girls and see if he still loves hockey as much. So,
yeah.
But in any event, so you're kind of getting back to your career, right? You're 18 years old. You're playing in the NHL with some heavy hitters. Like back in your day when you get in, there's clutching and grabbing. The rules were still, hockey's a tough game, but it was a lot tougher when you got in there. So
sure, yeah.
when you're 18, 19 years old, like what's going through your mind? Are you like, oh shit, I'm about to get my eye pumped shut? Like, I don't want to go back, pick up this puck because I'm going to get smoked. Like kind of, how do you adapt with all that and
that's
kind of grow your game?
Yeah, that's a good question. One of the reasons you stay with a family, you billet, and like in my case, is that the teams want you focused on just playing hockey, right? And because they understand that that's hard enough as it is. I think for me, even at 18, I was the youngest player in the league that year. And then the next year, I was the second youngest player in the league, I think, next to Jimmy Carson. And I understood what needed to take place on the ice, Jacob. What I didn't understand is how fast it would take place, right? And that's just repetition, right? When I said to you earlier that, 10, 12 years into it, you finally feel like, okay, now I know what it's like to be a pro, right? And what I meant by that is that it's all encompassing, right? You've got everything. You've got the actual repetitions that you put in, and then you have experience to couple that with, right? And knowledge, and you've got all this information from everybody. But at 18 or 19, it's really hard. And I think back then, intimidation, to your point, was a big part of the game. The kids today, everybody knows each other, right? So, if you're coming up in the league, and you could be in wherever, British Columbia, somebody knows of you, right?
Yep.
In your age group. And back then, we didn't have that sort of intimidation, not knowing about this particular guy or that guy. It was a huge part of it. And that's part of the learning curve, is who to stay away from, right? Mm-hmm. So I learned that pretty quickly.
Who was the guy that you quickly learned to stay away from? What was the first, okay, this is my welcome to the NHL moment?
Well, there were a few of them. I think back then, the New York Islanders were just coming off, they kind of handed the throne to the Edmonton Oilers, who won 4 in a row. Islanders won 4 in a row, but they still had, guys left over from those Stanley Cup teams, really Hall of Fame, Ring of Fame, if you will, Islanders. And there was one guy named Clark Gillies who was just a man. He was no helmet, beard, handsome guy, right? Big, tough left winger. And I didn't know he had a left hand, and I found out that he did. And he broke my nose. And the judge, the aforementioned judge, he used to sit right next to the visitors' penalty box, first row. And I would I'm getting up and collecting my teeth or whatever, and I'm skating past the judge, and the judge is just shaking his head. He's like, so we get done. It was an afternoon game, I think, and, we're out to dinner with the judge and I. And he's like, Craigie, he's a man, you got to stay away from those guys. I'm like, Judge, man, if he grabs you, I'm not going anywhere, right?
Did he jump you?
No, okay. That's the thing. He was just tough, right? Yeah. And honest. And, things happen in front of the net and whatever. And then all of a sudden it's on, right?
You didn't check the game notes to see he was a lefty?
Well, he was just tough.
Yeah.
He was tough. But that was just, there was all kinds, right? Like Bobby Probert here and, and Joey Kosher. Yep. And honestly, it was just a great game back then. It's a really good game now because it's so darn fast. But back then, guys like, Mario Lemieux, right, and Yager and Gretzky and all these guys, to your point, we were just clutching and grabbing and hanging on them and hooking them, and they still did what they did, right?
Right.
And it just and then go on before that, right? Ted Lindsay's a local guy here, and God rest his soul. But how they had it and how tough it was for them. And so I really gained an appreciation of the eras of hockey, including, today's game, which I appreciate because these kids are good, man.
The skill is unreal. Skill is unreal. Let's talk about, so you get traded, right? So you create Frank's been traded. I've never been traded, but what is that, how did that go? You're going into something unfamiliar. You're still a young kid. Right, you're still trying to cut your teeth in the NHL. You get traded to a completely new market. What kind of goes through your head there?
Yeah, your first trade in hockey, they're more prevalent than they are in most sports. So your first trade is your draft team. It shook me up, frankly, because there was a veteran that I used to drive with to the games. And it was the trade deadline, and I had rumors of me being traded and whatever. And Jim Korn was his name. He played a long time, and he's a lawyer now, played with the Red Wings, in fact. So I drove to the rink for the morning skate with Jim, and we're just talking back and forth. He says, well, if you're here after the morning skate, you're not going anywhere, right? So, okay, you can go home, you eat, take your nap, you get back to the rink. And I'm getting dressed, ready for the game. And I look across the way, and I don't see Jimmy there. And somebody said, well, yeah, Jimmy got traded to Calgary. I'm like, well, okay, it happens, right? So I'm getting dressed, about to go on for warm-ups, And Kirk Muller's our captain at the time. He comes over to me and says, the coach wants to see you. I said, all right. So I go in and I talk to the coach, and he says, you're not playing tonight. I said, well, why not? He says, well, you've been traded. I'm like, well, what are you talking about being traded? It's 4 hours after the trade deadline. Deadline was like 3:00. He says, yeah, you've been traded, but there was a problem with the fax machine, so it hasn't been officially processed yet.
You weren't getting text messages back then.
No. Right, yeah. It was a fax machine that the dot matrix type of thing. And so I got traded to Quebec, and that was the year before, like 2 years, a year and a half before Lindros declined to come to Quebec. And when I got traded to Quebec, nobody wanted to play hockey there, especially in Anglophone. And for me, though, I loved it from day one. And I got traded for a guy named Peter Stastny, who was an icon in Quebec City and still is, right? Just a great guy and a great player. And so anyway, I got traded to Quebec and, finished off the season there. I mean, it's a cultural difference there, needless to say, and it was wonderful. I just loved
how was it leaving the Judge and that family? Because like even when I was in Green Bay, I had like a family that I was tight with that was outside of the Packers organization, just somebody I'd met that had young kids that I'd hang out there. And then when I remember leaving to go to Kansas City, I was like, it was kind of sad. And at least I was able to call him and text him all the time. But for you back then, like communications probably whatever, but you still stay in contact with him?
Oh, yeah, great. That's really a great point, Frank. Actually, I had two. I had the Judge's family, right? And they were, what were they, 4 or 5 kids? 4 kids, right? And grandkids and all this stuff, right? So, and then I befriended another big Italian family with 9 kids, right? So that was devastating. And I'm such a mama's boy, right? Like I'm crying, and it was hard because of that, right? Probably the best advice I ever got in hockey. The FBI used to have retired agents come speak to us. Now they got their own security teams. And I remember that guy who was from the East Coast, and it was our first team meeting. And he said, you know what, make your friends outside of hockey. And that was the best advice I ever got. I have wonderful friends inside the game, but the ones that I'm in touch with still are people like the Judge's family and their grandkids, right? And now the Brancatos, we're still in touch, whatever, 40 years later, right? And it's been unreal. But to that point, I'm going to their weddings, their grandkids' weddings, they're coming to ours, and it's been that way for all this time, Frank. And that was that's the thing that I miss the most. And Quebec is such a beautiful city that it's easy to get people there. It's easier in the summer when the weather's nice, but it's just a great city. So we had a ton of visitors, and I loved it there, and I loved my 5 years there. So.
I had a similar kind of story, Craig. When I was in Kansas City, 2013, me and my wife, we moved to like a little downtown area, rented a place until I wanted to figure out like where I wanted to be in Kansas City. First, I actually had to make the team because Jake said I was traded from the Packers to Kansas City. My contract ran out there. I had nothing. Kansas City gave me a shot, right? So I was still in a way like, I don't know if I'm going to be here or not, but trying to make the roster. No, fair enough. And I was driving I've always been like a Mustang guy, being from Detroit. Always loved Ford, love Mustangs. And I see a guy driving an 03 Mustang Cobra, Sonic Blue. And this is like one of the cooler Mustangs. If you know Mustangs, you're like, that's a sweet car, the Terminator or whatever. And some people joke like, hey, I'm Frank, you want to be my friend? Like I'm very outgoing when it comes to just like talking to somebody or asking questions. And I like roll my window down. I'm like, beautiful car, bro. Like, we're like talking at the light through the window. And he's like, oh, you want to pull over and just chat more? I'm like, sure. And I had a Mustang back at home in Detroit. And we start talking. He's like, you want to just go for a ride? And I'm like, sure. So he's like drive around Kansas City, and he grew up there. And he was a Chiefs fan. And I, told him, I was like, oh, I saw, you just came in from Green Bay. And we drive around for maybe 10 minutes. And then he's like, I was like, it's just me and my wife here. He's like, yeah, it's just me and my wife. Do you guys want to come over for a barbecue? And we're like, sure. So that night we went over to Drew's house for a barbecue. They didn't have any kids. We didn't have any kids. And then my 6 years in Kansas City, we seemed to have kids all at the same time. And then just last year, I played in his invitational at his country club. My buddy Drew, and I talked to him a couple times a month just from a random, hey, nice car, bro. And now our family, are cool. And, those are friends you make forever. And the same thing with my family that I met in Green Bay, the Sussex. Every time I go back there, I meet up with them. And their kids, once were 8 years old and I was throwing little balls with them. Now they got, now they're college graduates or, getting married, things like that. So it's crazy how the time kind of flies and you make those relationships.
Well, you were lucky in that way. And I know enough football, and actually Christian, my son, played juniors in Green Bay. I know that those are two football towns, right? Like they are rabid, and the communities are, they're built around it, football, it seems, right? And I would suggest that Quebec is the same way. You watched Montreal, right? Now versus Carolina. I mean, they call Detroit Hockey Town. It pales in comparison to Montreal. I mean, or Quebec, or any of those Canadian cities for that matter, because it's in their blood, right? It is in their blood, and Quebec was the same way. Disappointingly, right? Not disappointingly, but just the way it panned out, we were really starting to get good when we moved to Colorado, and they had some lean years in Quebec, and I was proud to be part of that, literally from the ground floor to an eventual Stanley Cup. Like that was a big deal, and I know the fans are still disappointed that it happened a year after in Colorado.
So it was the year after. So you go to Colorado. Did they take everyone? So for people that don't know, the Quebec Nordiques turned into the Colorado Avalanche. And then the whole Carolina. Yeah. The question is, that happened with Phoenix, not too long ago. Does a lot of that staff go? What does that look like? Because, it's not just the players, it's, the trainers, it's the chefs, it's everything. So how was that whole experience? And then, you end up winning a Stanley Cup, your first year there, which is, it is the greatest trophy in all sports. I don't care what the Lombardi says, but
it's a pretty massive trophy.
Yeah.
So take us kind of through that. How did you guys learn about that? Are you guys kept in the dark? Do you know what's going on? What did that look like?
Yeah, that was leading up to that, we were bad, right? When I got there, we were really bad. And like I said, a lot of guys didn't want to play in Quebec for whatever reason. The taxes, right? The French culture, you name it. There was every excuse you can imagine. But there were guys that Joe Sakic was there, right? Matt Sundin was coming, Owen Nolan, super talented guys, right?
Big names.
And once we kind of started getting rid of the people that didn't want to be there, and guys like Joey started to mature as a player and individual, right? We started to get good. You start supplementing that. Lindros didn't want to play in Quebec, which I feel was a mistake. But in the end, I mean, I think for the trade, we got 5 players and $35 million, right? And so that trade included Peter Forsberg, right? So now we're starting to gain traction, and, the team started to get good. And to the point where I think we almost won the league the year before we won the Stanley Cup. But the economics were starting to change too. And the Canadian dollar was similar to what it is today, maybe a little less. It used to be, when I was traded from a U.S. team to a Canadian team, your salary trade exchange was involved as well. So I went from being Canadian U.S. dollars to Canadian dollars when I got traded there. And you take quite a hit, So anyway, that started to change. We started to get good. I think the last time Montreal won the Stanley Cup was '93. They won 11 overtime games, I think, that year, and they beat us 2 or 3 times in overtime in the I think it was the second round, it was the first round. But it was just great. The feeling was great. The fans were rabid. And then the next year, I think, was a lockout year, but there were rumors starting, right? And I think the only players privy to those rumors would have been our best players like Joe Sakic, We darn near won the league that year, and then the Rangers are coming off the Stanley Cup, if I remember. They barely made the playoffs. They beat us in the first round with Messier and that group, Adam Graves. And then the season was over, and literally we started moving almost the next day, it seemed. And that was quite the challenge, but it helps when you're involved with a professional organization. They can expedite a lot of processes, and it's much the same team that ended the season in Quebec moved to Colorado, and that was pretty cool.
So I remember that. I didn't really follow sports a whole lot growing up, but I followed the Red Wings during that. Maybe it's around that period when there was like the Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Claude Lemieux. Like, was that, Craig, around your time? Like, where were you? Like, I remember that was the octopus getting thrown on the ice, like that kind of time. Like, where are we at with that? Is that around that time?
Well, Draper got hit that year, and then the next year you were gone, if I'm reading the DB right.
That's right. Yeah, so that whole year, that year kind of started the rivalry, if you will. With us, actually, we played Detroit the first game of the year. I didn't score very many goals, but I remember scoring in that game, and that was cool. And we just had a really good year. We had a really good team.
Was it at Joe Louis Arena?
No, it was in.
So before our technical difficulties, we're talking kind of like the biggest thing that kind of got me into hockey was the brawl at Joe Louis, right? So you're there the year you guys win the cup, kind of the hit on Draper, a little from behind, a lot from behind, into the, into this face, and then you guys go on to win the Stanley Cup. So right then and there, the rivalry was getting heated, but that was like the tipping point, right?
Sure, no question. Yeah. So Drapes got hit in the playoffs the year before the big brawl at Joe Louis, right? And Claude hit him. I don't think guys go out there and hurt people. I really don't. I think things happen, and I think the biggest thing after all that was the fact that normally if something happens on the ice that especially when a guy gets hurt, there's ways to send words. Somebody knows somebody on the other team. You might know the trainer, right? And you just send word that, hey, is Drapes okay? You know what? I didn't mean that kind of thing, right? Yep. And I feel like you still may have to pay a price for it. There still may be some retribution, but it's minimized by the fact that, say, you know what? Hey, listen, I didn't mean that. I'm willing to accept the consequences, but that wasn't my intent. And I think it would have been extinguished a little bit had that happened, but it didn't. And, we did go on to win that series. And in the playoffs, the stakes are too high. Oftentimes you won't see the retribution that immediately because, we're all after one thing, right? That year we happened to get it. But then the next year, the way things play out, it's a long season. You're playing each other multiple times. It's bound to happen. And this was just with the personalities involved in it all, from Claude to Mac to Patty Roy to others, right? It's just was kind of kindling, it's constantly burning.
Well, there's the code, right? Like,
what do those consequences look like?
What happened?
Okay, so you just get beat up. Like, there's not like consequences like just.
Well, you got to take it, right, Craig? Like, I mean, you hit someone like that,
now the enforcer's after you,
heads on a swivel. So something's gonna happen.
In that case too, everybody kind of knows. I mean, everybody knows, and they answer the bell here too nowadays. If there's something egregious that happens on the ice, you're going to have to account for it. Back then, you might have to account for it multiple times during multiple games or multiple seasons, and that's what happened with Detroit. I mean, Darren, he's not going to let his teammates be done that way, and call it code, call it whatever you want. We understood that, right? Yep. And fortunately, Drapes was better, and it just Dino was on that team too, Cicerelli.
Yep.
Right. That's a whole nother thing. Dino's got an igniting personality, I'll just say. And so there's just a lot of, the ashes would kind of be burning burning out a little bit. It'd just be ash, and all of a sudden a fire would start again. And it lasted a long time. And if you talk to the Detroit people, though, and both fans, they just love that rivalry.
Yeah, one of the greatest in sports. Now, so you win the cup, but you're gone when that all happens. So winning the cup, so going to the year prior, right? I mean, you beat Detroit, that happens. I mean, what is that? You know, you said earlier, like, you really didn't think the pro hockey was it, and then now you're a Stanley Cup champion. So, you know, kind of take us through that. I mean, it's hardest trophy to win, 7-game series of just battling, and you guys are finally, you know, coming out on top.
Yeah. You know, for me, like I said, I was 10 or 11 years into it by that point, and I battled injuries all the time, you know, and it was very frustrating for me because every time I gained traction, I feel like an injury would happen. And that year I was playing from Christmas on, I was playing with a shoulder that was separated. You know, I was having the best year of my career at Christmas time. Thinking like, man, this is kind of fun this way. You know, you're on a good team, you're contributing, and then I blow my shoulder out. It eventually needs to be reconstructed. But I also knew that was probably the best chance I was going to have to win a cup, right? And so, you know, you kind of slide. In my case, I slid into a subordinate role, but I was smart enough to realize that I wasn't going to jeopardize that. I wasn't going to jeopardize, you know, sure, you want to play more, all this stuff, but to your point, Jacob, it's a tough trophy to win. And you can ask Connor McDavid that right now, right? It's just hard. And finally, you know, I was out in New Jersey. We weren't great. We made a long playoff run. My 4th year there, one game away from the Stanley Cup. The next year, we didn't make the playoffs, right? Get back to Quebec, and we're like I'm back to ground floor. We rebuild. Eventually, we win. So I understood what the process was like, and I understood that now, 30 years later, that if I could just win one, as Frank knows, you're always a Super Bowl champion. You're always a Stanley Cup champion, and you're always associated with guys for that 1 year. And then, you know, if you're lucky in the Red Wings case, you know, you win multiple cups together, and that bond becomes even tighter. But that 30-year reunion that we had this year, you remember Chris Simon?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Chris ended his own life, over a year or two ago. So he wasn't with us. But he had 5 kids, and they were all with us. And it was so cool. And they were so appreciative to be invited, you know. Like, it was a really, really, really special time. The Russians
probably a big classy move by 19 there.
What's that?
I'm assuming that was a big move by 19, Sakic, to bring them the kids in and have them share and all that.
Yeah, like first class, Jake. First class the whole way. You know, all the crap that's going on between the Russians and the Ukraine. And, you know, the guys that came over back then, like Valery Kaminsky, Alexei Gusarov, not saying as a socialist, he wasn't Russian, but, you know, these guys are all part of the old Russian Red Army team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fetisov was on that team as well. Konstantinov, right?
Yeah.
And now with all the stuff happening over there, and yet we get to meet again in Colorado, like, it was way cool. I would do that over again in a heartbeat. So it's a roundabout way to answer your question, but that leaves an indelible impact. And that's not even, I didn't even touch on what it does to your family and your friends, because that was the year before the Red Wings won their first one.
Yeah.
So, you know, that Stanley Cup wasn't as commonplace around here as it was, you know, in the years subsequent to that. You know, in fact, at the party that I had at Paint Creek Country Club, Sean Chambers, who was a Sterling Heights guy, he won the year before with Dallas. Who won the year before us? Whoever won the year before. His parents had never seen his name on the Stanley Cup, so they came to our party and got to see his name on it. So it was cool. It's cool. Yeah.
Isn't there one that, like, isn't there New Jersey? What's new now? I don't know.
Devils.
Devils.
Yeah, that's where. Yeah, he was drafted. All right, so because I want to be respectful of time, but I am curious, kind of how you get traded. I believe it was like Tampa, and a little cup of coffee in Toronto, and then one of the greatest jerseys in all of sports is the Detroit Vipers. At what point were you like, okay, I know you said you battled injury, you have kids at this time. Is it like, hey, I've gotten to the top of the mountain, and I'm happy with where my career is ending? How does that, it sounds pretty storybook for
It didn't
everyone.
happen that way with me. Most guys are told when to leave. They don't get to retire on their terms.
Mhm.
And, in my case, I would call it injuries. Injuries was a cumulative thing. I blew my knee out in Toronto. And I haven't had enough knee injuries to know that this one was really bad. It was the terrible triad plus an OCD, an osteochondral defect, which is bone on bone. So I knew this one was bad, and I don't know. I wanted to go over to Europe to play, but it's just a tough game, and my body had enough, and the game told me that it was time to go.
And right now I'm going through it. I'm right now 7 years removed from the NFL, but I'm not that I don't forget the drills I used to do, but I'm almost struggling to I almost have to just see it, and it's tough for me to put it out in words. It's like, so how do you coach these young kids? And you're a little bit further removed than I am from playing, but do you take classes, or is it all just based on feel, look, what you've done in the past, how you would do it? That's another way I like to coach it too. Is
Still studying the game.
This is how I would do it. I remember Kevin Green coaching me, and he's like, Frankie, this is how I would do it. And he was a Hall of Fame linebacker, so I was like, all right, I'm going to do it that same way too, right? So what's your take there on just coaching these young kids and the mentality you bring to it?
Yeah, I feel fortunate. The guy that I coach with, he and I both played the same way, meaning we weren't supremely gifted athletically, meaning we weren't the fastest, strongest, or anything like that. We really played with our minds, and I think the hard part, what I've learned through my son, Frank, to answer your question, is we teach basic fundamentals. And we try to teach, you alluded to it earlier, we try to teach a little bit more will than skill. If football is like hockey now, these kids get so much skill. Where they lack is what I feel like old time hockey players used to bring. We all brought will, right? If you didn't bring will, you can be assured your parents are going to let you know that, hey, all I'm asking for is a great effort, right? They'll get what they get on their time, as I said earlier, not on my time, right? So if we just plant seeds, and to your point, what I try to do is ask open-ended questions. Like, we try to coach the kids. We know the answers, but we want to know that they know the answers. So we always end it with something like, well, Jacob, what would you do in that situation? Or what were your options? And have the patience to let them figure it out. And
Iron hard off the glass.
yeah, so and that's the way I like it. And the other thing I focus on, again, this is mostly through my son's experiences, is basic fundamentals. What happens every time you step on the ice? It could be, retrievals, meaning going back for pucks as a defenseman. It's hard to play with your back to the ice, to the ice. So teaching a defenseman how to play with his back to the ice is a critical skill, right? In football, it could be tackling, it could be running, whatever. It's just basic fundamentals. The skill is there. These kids are all over-skilled, in my opinion, and in many cases under-willed, right? So if they put a real solid effort or a great effort into their game, into their practices, everything else will just come. It'll come because they want it to come, not because we want it to come, right? So that's kind of what we focus on, is really simple, basic stuff that happens every shift of every game of every practice.
I love it. Gives me a lot of thinking, because I start with my youngins. I'm the director of football for the junior Cougars.
Sure. Right.
Got 100 kids in the organization, 50 on the freshmen, 50 on JV. So it's fourth and fifth, and then or third and fourth, and then fifth and sixth graders. And we start in July, and sometimes it's like, what do we do with the kids early for the first 2 weeks? They can't be in pads.
Sure.
I know exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to make them sit in about a quarter eagle stance with bending the knee, bending the ankles, and they're going to have to sit there for about a minute and a half and just do strict, like, because football, you talk about fundamentals, it's all about low man wins, right? But you can't be the low man with straight knees when you're tired. You know what I mean? So it's like, number one, that also builds mental toughness. How long can you sit in that position? You're going to want to quit. And then, obviously they're third and fourth graders, so I have to take a little easy on them. A little different than it was when I was in college and our coaches were making us go until we threw up.
Yeah.
But you're right. I'm going back to the fundamentals for my little junior Cougars before we go to the to win our Super Bowl.
And I use other sports. For example, next year I'm going to be coaching a kid that's 6'7". He's 6'7", 225 pounds already. He's 15. And so I've already starting to formulate a game plan for him, Frank, in the sense that how am I going to lower his center of gravity, right? Because right now he's like a newborn colt out there. And so all I'll think about, and I'm watching a lot of the basketball playoffs and thinking about how somebody like the Joker out in Denver, when he rebounds a ball, right? He passes like no other big man in basketball right now. But as he's rebounding the ball, he's getting it and he's already looking for his outlet. And oftentimes his outlet pass is 4 feet from him, but he makes that pass, right? And so, in the hockey world, and Jacob would know this, right? Datsuk, right? He was known for his YouTube highlights, right? He fascinated people with his skill level. But what people don't remember about him is that before he started to fascinate, he facilitated, right? He was an unbelievable defensive player, including, I think, winning a couple Defensive Player of the Year awards, right? His passing skills are superlative, right? So before you fascinate, I say, you got to facilitate, right? And so in a defenseman's case in hockey, you got to get that puck and you got to move it to the puck carriers, right? You move it to your forwards, and it's a basic skill, but it's a skill that translates to whatever level you are playing at. It doesn't matter from 7-year-olds to 17-year-olds to 47-year-olds playing in the pros. Well, there's no 47-year-olds, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I love it. Well, Craig, we're coming up on time. Can't thank you enough. Again, this is another one. I say this every time we end, that we could have another hour of this.
I love it.
We'll have to you'll have to pop down for a beer. We'll have to come up.
Yeah.
Maybe get Christian on one of these days to and hear it from
It'd be fun.
a young buck versus
Yeah.
A guy who's a little farther removed. But nonetheless, man, we appreciate you. We thank you for coming on, and we do really appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you guys for having me. And Kelly, thank you for your patience with these technical difficulties. But
I think it's more on our end, buddy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for thinking of me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, buddy. Have a great day.
You too, guys.
Thank you for watching the most recent episode of Dealer Out of Office, sponsored by Auto Hauler Exchange.
Auto Hauler Exchange is a B2B marketplace where our customers post their shipping opportunities direct to carriers. The technology and the operations team I have behind me take care of everything else.